Good evening. It's good to see everybody tonight. We're in the book of 2 Samuel, finishing up chapter 17, and going to get to our questions tonight, and then on, hopefully, to chapter 18 and beyond. I'm going to ask Jonathan if he would to lead us in our prayer. Amen. Well, we were talking about David, and he's been fleeing from Absalom and his men. It's a really ironic situation to be in, to have your own son out to kill you and to take over your position as king. Can you hear me? If I got the mic on? Yeah. Okay. Didn't have anywhere to clip it much. But Absalom is out to get him, and it looks like he's going to win. And there's some other men that come to the David to support David, and a man by the name of Shobai and Machir and Barzillai. And these are obscure men. They're special mention because they helped David in a time of great need, and certainly friends in need are friends indeed. Friends in need are friends indeed. And the people are hungry and thirsty. They've been out there in the wilderness, and these are not dramatic warriors by any means. They're not highly trained, but they helped David in this crisis as much as some of the bravest soldiers. And they apparently were sent specially by God to comfort David in his affliction. So God has not forsaken David. And with that in mind, let's go to our questions on page 74. I regret that we don't have any more books. We've ordered several times and have given them all out. But let's look at page 74 at the questions that are dealing with chapters 15 and 16 and 17. And the first question is, what political means did Absalom use to steal the hearts of the men of Israel? Okay, he pretended to be deeply concerned about everybody that had a complaint. Yeah. I feel your pain. That's kind of what he was saying to him. And anybody had a complaint, he automatically took their side and said, well, if I was king, if I was in authority, we'd do it the way you're wanting it done. But I'm not. So that wins people over to his side. So he's apparently very charismatic at this point, and that can go a long way. He was also impressive. What was it about how he traveled around during the daytime? Okay, he was a handsome man, very handsome. Yeah, and he had chariots and horses and 50 men that ran before him. A big fanfare made him look really important. And that's the way he wanted to come off to them. So we ask what political means he used to steal the hearts of the people. Every morning he rose up early, went to the gate city. That's where all the city fathers would gather and talk about things that concerned the city. And when somebody came needing a judgment, he would always take their side. So this is how he gained a following. They believed he really did care about them, when really he really cared about himself and was a self-promoter. Number two, under what pretense did Absalom go to Hebron to begin his rebellion? Okay, it was a hypocritical thing, wasn't it? He pretended he was going to pay vows to the Lord. He had made a vow to the Lord. He's going there to pay vows. That wasn't the reason he was going at all. Why was he going? He's going to rally his troops, isn't he? Yeah, he's trying to rally his army, rally his troops to fight against David. And he said, if the Lord brings me back to Jerusalem, I will serve the Lord. Are we in a position to make deals like that with the Lord? Lord, if you'll do this, I'll do this for you. Like he really needs us. Yeah. So we're not in a bargaining position at all with the Lord to say, Lord, if you'll do this, then I'll do this. And we'll come to an agreement, compromise. But that's the way he expressed it. Does that mean if he wasn't brought back to Jerusalem, he would not serve the Lord? He said, if you'll bring me back to Jerusalem, I will serve the Lord. What if the Lord didn't bring him back to Jerusalem? He's not going to serve the Lord. So that was the way he expressed it. Name David's trusted counselor who defected to the rebellion. Ahithophel. Okay, we've talked about him a good bit. He was a very wise counselor after worldly sort of things and had advised kings. And he was respected because of that. And unfortunately, he left David and went over to Absalom's side. Number 4, why did David flee Jerusalem instead of staying and fighting? Yeah, he said, if we don't go now, we won't escape Absalom. He realized at that point that Absalom had the upper hand. And he said, lest he overtake us and bring a great disaster upon us and strike the city. David's concerned about the city of Jerusalem. David loved Jerusalem, and he didn't want the city to become a battleground and it be destroyed, strike the city. And I thought I had some verses down for that where David, I guess I didn't write them down. Oh yeah, I did. In the Psalms. Let's take a look at the Psalms. Chapter 122 is one of them. We're going to see how David felt about Jerusalem. 122. I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built as a city that is compact together, where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to the testimony of Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord, for thrones are set for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. So he mentions Jerusalem several times there in that chapter, what he thinks about it, what he wants for Jerusalem. Another one is chapter 137, and this one really shows how he feels about Jerusalem. And this takes place when they're in Babylonian captivity. So Babylon is referred to here. He says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. And Zion's another name for Jerusalem. We hung our harps upon the willows in the midst of it, for there those who carried us away captive asked of us a song, and those who plundered us requested mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. So they wanted these Hebrew slaves that had been captured into Babylon, they wanted to entertain them. Sing us some of your songs. Amuse us with mirth, with funny stuff. And so that's what they requested. And he said, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. If I do not remember you, let my tongue cling unto the roof of my mouth. If I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, to its very foundation. So he's praying for Jerusalem there. And David shows us how much he loves Jerusalem. So he didn't want it to be a battleground. He didn't want it to be torn up with war. And so one of the things he wanted to avoid by escaping the city was, if we're going to have a battle, let's take it elsewhere. Let's take it outside the city of Jerusalem. Number 5, who did David leave to keep the king's palace? 10 concubines. Okay. 10 concubines to keep the king's palace. And that ended up being a big mistake. Number 6, name the prominent soldiers who fled the city with David. Okay, Cherethites, Pelethites, Gittites. 600 men who had followed him from Gath, or Goth, however you pronounce it, back when he was living among the Philistines. David had to live among the Philistines in order to avoid Saul's attempts to kill him. And number 7, who was Ittai? Okay, he was an exile from the Gittites who had just arrived, but he was extremely loyal to David and was willing to jeopardize his own life, although he hadn't been there that long. He highly respected David. And number 8, what position did Zadok and Abiathar take in the rebellion? Who are they first? They're both priests. And, okay. They carried the ark back to Jerusalem, didn't they? That's what we're told. And while David waited to know the Lord's will, whether the Lord would support David or not, David's still in doubt as to whether the Lord's going to support him anymore after what he did. But the Lord does. David's repentance was accepted. It was from the heart, a contrite heart. And you can read the 51st Psalm, his psalm of contrition over his sin. And the Lord forgave him and continued to use him, even to write this book of Psalms, the longest book in the Bible. Okay, number 9, describe David's attitude toward the rebellion. Yeah, he's still not certain how the Lord is going to treat him. And he says, let the Lord do with me as he will. That's what he says. And so David went up with the people to the Mount of Olives weeping. They were in a state of deep depression and despair. All the people were weeping because they viewed it as the end. Apparently at that point they didn't think the Lord was going to help them and that Absalom was going to prevail. Number 10, how did David react to learning of Ahithophel's defection? He prayed that God would turn Ahithophel's counsel to foolishness. And he did. David's prayer was answered. Ahithophel was normally a very wise counselor. Of course, he did give some advice there that would have forever kept David and Absalom from being reconciled, but it wasn't good advice. Number 11, why did David not allow Hushai to follow him as he left Jerusalem, and what assigned role did he give to him? Okay, by him saying that Hushai would be a burden to him, I think indicated his age. He was apparently a very old man, and David couldn't protect him like he needed to. And so he said that Hushai would be a burden to him. So he assigned him to be a spy for David, to go over to Absalom's camp and to counsel Absalom and to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. That's a pretty big request to make of somebody, and to assume that that's going to work. I think the only reason it worked was because God was involved. It probably wouldn't have worked any other way. But that's exactly what happened. Hushai went over and became a counselor. Yeah, I think we Can't always put our finger on it. We can often look back and see the hand of God in something. Uh, I believe He answers prayers. I do. Yeah. Yeah. So Hushai did what David requested of him. He endangered himself because how was he to know that Absalom wouldn't detect or wouldn't suspicion that he was coming as a spy and root him out of there? And who would serve as David's messengers? Number 12. The sons of Zadok and Abiathar, Ahimaaz and Jonathan, it was their sons, would serve as messengers for David. Number 13, who was Ziba, and what did he do upon hearing of David's plight? He was the servant of Mephibosheth. Who was Mephibosheth? Don't ask me to say his name again. Okay, he was Saul's son, surviving son. Yeah, he was crippled. He was crippled in both of his feet. And what did Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, what did he bring? He brought donkeys and he brought food, donkeys for the king's people to ride on, and food for them to eat. But Ziba wasn't on the level, was he? He was trying to feather his own nest. And apparently there's no evidence that Mephibosheth had said what Ziba accused him of. And what was the explanation that he gave for Mephibosheth's absence? He's waiting in Jerusalem for the house of Israel to restore Saul's kingdom to him, was what Ziba said. There's no evidence of that at all, but it made Ziba sound good and look good, and like he was on the side of David. Yeah, he gave that stuff back to him. Number 15, what did Shimei do to David, and why did he do it? Yeah, he cursed David. He called him a bloodthirsty man. David was a great warrior, but I don't think we see evidence of him being a bloodthirsty man. And we're going to see it right here. He doesn't kill Shimei. If he was a bloodthirsty man, he would have killed Shimei for saying that. And but he was accused of bringing the blood of the house of Saul upon himself, upon David. And anybody who knew how David had treated the house of Saul knows that's not true. David bent over backwards to protect Saul and all of his family. Anybody that said or did anything against Saul or his family, David was up defending Saul. He's the Lord's anointed. You don't mess with the Lord's anointed. And there were people that wanted to kill Saul. In fact, when David had two chances to kill Saul, he had men trying to get him to do it. David said, no, he's the Lord's anointed. Don't harm him. So David had not brought the blood of Saul's house on himself. He had protected them. And even the man that claimed to have killed Saul, what did David do about him? Remember what was he? I forgot what nationality he was. He was a Hittite, I believe. Came and said that Saul had ordered him to kill him, and Saul hadn't done it. He ordered his armor bearer to do it, and he did it. But Saul was already dead, apparently, when he got there. But he thought he would be praised for killing Saul. No, he wasn't praised. David punished him. He had him put to death because of claiming to kill Saul. Our 16th question, how did David accept this? We're talking about Shimei's cursing David for being a bloodthirsty man. How did David accept that? Yeah, some of the people, David had men all around him that could have killed him, and some of them wanted to kill him to shut him up. And David said, no, let him talk. Let him say what he wants to say. Shimei was a pretty brave man to say all that stuff in front of David's men, but he was saying what he truly felt. Now, in our next lesson, we're going to find that Shimei apologizes for this. So keep that in mind. We're going to come up on an apology from Shimei for saying these things. But at the time, that's what he truly believed. And David's accepted this. He said, it must be the will of the Lord. David kind of looked at it like he deserved it. And so he said, leave him alone. Why did Absalom receive Hushai? Hushai had pledged loyalty to him, didn't he? Pledged loyalty to him, to whom the Lord and Israel should choose. So he wasn't saying, I favor one over the other. I just favor whoever the Lord chooses. At that point, it was looking like it was going to be Absalom because he had the upper hand. But Hushai was there on behalf of David. Number 18, what did Absalom do to show publicly his ascension to the throne and that the rebellion was irreversible? He went into his father's concubines at the advice of who? Ahithophel. Ahithophel wanted him to seal the deal where he and his father would never be reconciled again. And the way to do that was for Absalom to go into his father's 10 concubines. And so that's what he did in broad daylight. They had tents set up out there. And number 19, what counsel did Ahithophel give to destroy David? Okay, he suggests to Absalom, let me take 12,000 men, and that's a big number compared to what David had, and catch David while he's weak and weary and afraid. I don't know if the word had gotten back to David and all the people weeping or not, but something happened there. But while he's weak and weary and afraid, let me take 12,000 people, and I'll separate him from the people, and we'll only strike the king, and we'll bring the rest of the people back to you, and they will follow you. That sounded like a good plan. It sounded good to Absalom. Absalom was for that. Until what? Until Hushai gives his, he asked Hushai for his advice. And he ends up liking the advice of Hushai better than the advice of Ahithophel. We talked some about that. And number 20, what counsel did Hushai give to destroy David? What was it? Well, he was going to send an army led by Absalom. Absalom liked Hushai's advice better, apparently, because it made Absalom the hero. He was the one leading the army. And the other way was going to be Ahithophel leading the army. And he's the one that's going to go kill David. So when Hushai suggested a thing that would make Absalom look like the hero, he liked his advice better. And we kind of answered number 20 there too. Hushai's plan to kill David was with Absalom's army. 21, whose counsel did the war council decide to follow? Hushai's advice. 22, to what did the historian attribute this decision? To the Lord defeating the counsel of Hitherfield, didn't he? So David's prayer was answered to turn Ahithophel's advice to foolishness. He followed the advice, and of course that was a bad thing that he did. 23, what information did Hushai send to David? Okay, don't spend the night in the plain of the wilderness, but speedily cross over the river lest the king be swallowed up. So Hushai is doing his job. He's reporting to David what David needs to know and needs to hear. Number 24, what did David do upon hearing from Hushai? He crossed over the Jordan. He followed the advice. So David was not afraid to follow the advice of wise advisors. And so he followed that advice. Because Hushai is there spying on him. He trusts Hushai. Hushai could have turned against him. He could have given him bad advice and David could have gotten killed, but he trusts him. Number 25, what did Ahithophel do upon learning that Absalom chose to follow Hushai's counsel instead of his own? He took his own life, committed suicide, set his house in order, and went and hanged himself. We drew a parallel between him and Judas Iscariot. Judas was annoyed with the consequence of his advice, and he went and hanged himself. Both of them were traitors. Ahithophel was a traitor to David, and Judas was a traitor to Jesus. Number 26, what similarities can you find between Judas and Hitherfield? We've already talked about that. Both of them are traitors. Neither one of them gave any thought to the hereafter. They're just thinking and annoyed by the present circumstances right then and there. And when people are only thinking about the present and not about the future, there's no telling what they're liable to do. It may mess up their future. Well, he would have. He sure would have. Number 27, what town became David's headquarters while he was in exile? Mahanaim, I think is how you say it. And who was Absalom's captain? Amasa. Verse 25 tells us that. So he replaces Joab. And who brought supplies to David? Okay, these men, their names were not familiar to us. Shobi, the son of Nahash, Machir, Barzillai brought all kinds of food to David and his men. So there were some loyal men that are relatively unknown to David. Any comments or questions about those chapters, 15, 16, and 17, before we go on to chapter 18? So if you're following us in the Bible, we're at chapter 18 of 2 Samuel. And this is going to begin talking about the decline of David's kingdom and of Absalom's rebellion and a civil war that erupts. And so we'll talk about these. And let me go back to 2 Samuel. Verse 1 of chapter 18 says, And David numbered the people who were with him, and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. Then David sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai. There he is again, the Gittite. And the king said to the people, I also will surely go with you myself. Well, David knew how to organize an army, didn't he? And we see him doing it right here. And he set them in those 3 divisions under the leadership of Joab and Abishai and Ittai. And he said, I will surely go out with you. Well, it kind of looks like now David knows that the commander belonged out there with his army, not necessarily in the middle of the battle, but at least where he could advise what to do. Often the kings would maybe get on the top of a tall hill or a mountain and watch the battle below and send messengers, but they would go to battle. And that's how chapter 7, long in there, began. It was a time when kings go forth to battle, and David didn't go. He's out walking on top of the house. when he encounters Bathsheba. Why he didn't go, we're not told. But David now seems to know that the commander belonged out there with the battle, and he's not going to repeat his previous mistake of not going to battle when he should have. Back in chapter 11. I think I said 7. Chapter 11. And so, what do the people say to David about this? They don't want him to go. Yeah. Yeah, they said, you shall not go out. And so they didn't want him going out to battle with the rest of the army. And there were reasons why that are given, why they didn't want that. What were they? Yeah, your life is more valuable than 10,000 of us. We need your leadership. We need you to lead and guide us. We need somebody that knows what they're doing, somebody that's a good organizer. And also that they could bring reserves in if they were needed. And so they're telling David that he's more help to them in the city than he would be out there at the battle. And they also knew something else. How hard it's going to be for David to fight against his son Absalom. And that's really a sore sticking point right there. Does David say, nothing doing, I'm not listening to that? What is David's reaction? Whatever seems best to you, I will do. So David's not so high on himself. He's not stubborn. He knows how to submit to good advice when he hears it of others. He's not giving up leadership by listening to their advice. A good leader will do that, will listen. So he practices good leadership by listening to wise advice of the people. That's the sign of a good leader, not one that's headstrong and won't listen to anybody. So, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So it says the king stood beside the gate, and the people went out by hundreds and by thousands. They're willing to take on sacrifice and danger for the benefit of their king. And I think their devotion to David as the king is an example of how believers should be devoted to our king, Jesus. And so we see an example there, that they trusted David. And David gives some commands to his 3 captains that he named a while ago, Ittai and the other men that we mentioned earlier. He gives some commands to them. David wanted it clearly known. What he wanted known about Absalom? Deal gently with him. He wants him captured alive. He doesn't want them to kill him. And that he should not be mistreated in any way. And so all the people heard that. David gave his commandment in the presence of all the people, we're told, and that the captains would feel greater pressure to do what David commanded, because everybody was a witness to this. They heard David say it. So the end result is that Absalom's armies are defeated. People went out to the field of battle, and those loyal to David fought against, and incidentally, Absalom's people were called Israel, and David's people are Judah. So you kind of already have a division between the 12 tribes there before they ever go into Assyrian and Babylonian captivity. There's already kind of a division among the people. And so those that were loyal to David fought against the group called Israel, the ones following Absalom, because Israel wasn't loyal to David. And Israel was seduced by Absalom's charisma and his power and his impressiveness. And the people of Israel are overthrown before the servants of David. And that experienced leadership of David and his captains, probably one of the main reasons, but then the main reason is God was with him. Jane? Yeah. Uh, yeah. This was another wise thing on the part of David to fight the battle in the woods, that apparently his people knew that area better than Absalom's people would. The wood was devoured more people that day than the sword, it says. And that kind of implies that that God fought David's battle in an unusual way. There, yeah. And the people that are loyal to Absalom seem to be swallowed up by the woods. They're not familiar with it. And I don't know if there was thick oaks and tangled briars and all that kind of thing. You get in the woods, you don't know what to expect. And if you're not familiar with it, if you've never fought that kind of a battle before, you're going to be at a great disadvantage. There could have been caves in the woods. Whatever it wasn't a good place for Absalom's men to be. It was to their disadvantage greatly. And so David was wise in pitching the battle there, where they kind of knew the territory and the other army didn't. And it's been supposed that there were pits and swamps and other things there. We don't know what was there, and being entangled. But anyway, they were devoured. Maybe wild animals in there. We don't know. But finally, what happens to Absalom? Okay, we sometimes hear it said that his hair got caught in the tree. Does it really say that? It doesn't say his hair got caught, does it? I've seen pictures of it, artist pictures that have done it with his hair caught in the tree. It says he was caught in the tree. Let's look at it and see exactly what it says, so we'll know. And that's in, chapter 14. Well, no, chapter 14 tells us about his hair. Chapter 17 tells us about the advice there. 18 verse which? 9, okay. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. The mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth. So it's his head. Could have been his hair, but it says his head. Yeah, but I've seen artist drawings that has him caught by his hair, because the Bible said so much about his hair already, how much of it he had and how much it weighed. Yeah. Yeah. So that may have been the thing that he was so proud of led to his undoing, maybe. Yeah, he was. And I think that's why he's in the battle, because he liked Hushai's advice of him being the leader. So we're told that Absalom rode on a mule, and his vanity is kind of what puts him in this battle against the wise counsel of Ahithophel. He goes against that, and he gets his head caught in the terebinth tree, and he's left hanging there, it says, between heaven and earth. Between heaven and earth. Keep in mind, he was known for his good looks and his luxurious hair and all of that. Adam Clark, who's a commentator, he's careful to point out that the text doesn't say Absalom was caught by his hair. We assume that. It may be that he was caught by his neck. Nevertheless, the image remains of Absalom hanging in the tree. And he's hung between heaven and earth, being rejected by both, he said. So that's kind of an interesting way of putting it. He's what? Yeah. Yeah, we've seen that happen in Western, where a guy rides a horse under a tree and he gets caught and the horse keeps going. But he's caught in the branches of this tree, and this has to put him in a kind of a state of terror. He hadn't dreamed of anything like this happening. He's about to win the battle, he thinks. And all of a sudden, the turn of events changes for him. He's hanging there in that tree and apparently unable to get out of it. And it was reported to Joab. And Joab wonders why this man that discovered him didn't immediately kill him. He wonders that. What was the man's reply? Yeah. He wasn't going to do it out of disobedience and out of faithfulness to David. He wasn't going to do that. What did Joab promise this man? Money. He promised him money and a promotion. If he would kill Absalom, he'll give you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. But the man still wouldn't do it out of loyalty to David. When you found people that were loyal to David, they were really loyal, weren't they? Really loyal. Even when they could have feathered their own nest by betraying him. And this military belt, kind of a chief ornament of a soldier, was a highly prized thing, but he still wouldn't do it for that. And so Joab, what's he do? How's he go about getting rid of Absalom? Took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart. So Joab is not hesitating to kill Absalom, though he knew David had commanded him not to do it. Joab is convinced that it's in David's best interest to kill Absalom. I think in the long run, Joab is right. David is too close to the situation to see the problems that would have happened if Absalom had lived, because people would still be loyal to him. And and so Absalom was shown justice and not mercy. Absalom pretty well got what he deserved, didn't he? He's a murderer, he's a traitor, he's a rapist. He raped David's concubines. Joab knew that David was generally indulgent toward his children and wouldn't punish Absalom. Joab knows David. They're the ones that finished him off. Apparently those 3 spears didn't do it. They finished him off. Isn't it ironic that Absalom went? I have the New King James. Let's see. It might have said something else, javelins, yeah, instead of spears. Whatever it was, it didn't kill him. And those 10 men. Is it ironic that 10 men come to kill Absalom after Absalom lay with 10 of David's concubines? Maybe some symbolic in number there, symbolism in numbers. Anyway, Absalom was slain. So I think the best we can say about Joab is that Joab was correct, but he wasn't right. And what I mean by that is that he was correct in understanding that it was better for David and for Israel that Absalom be dead. But he wasn't right in disobeying the king. He disobeyed the king's order to spare Absalom. And so David's dealing with King Saul. We see that God can deal with those who are in authority, and we don't need to disobey him and claim we can have a clear conscience about that. So anyway, Absalom should have died a long time ago because of justice. But now his own crimes are visited on him. Let's mark our places there, and we'll pick up there next time. We're in chapter 18.